who was wrongly portrayed as a hero. Oh my god, yes, the episode where she needs money for the down payment on her apartment because of her own fuck-ups and she didn't bother saving anything, too busy buying shoes or whatever, is the worst and shows how fucked up she is. She doesn't have the money, yet makes somewhere around $1 million a year, considering her lifestyle and where she lives, doesn't have savings, and when Miranda and Samantha offer to help, she instead guilts Charlotte into giving her the money because Charlotte didn't offer. And then Jack chopped down what was the world's last beanstalk, adding murder and ecological terrorism to the theft, enticement, and trespass charges already mentioned, and all the Giants' children didn't have a daddy anymore, but he got away with it and lived happily ever after, without so much as a guilty twinge about what he had done. Which proves that you can be excused for just about anything if you are a hero, because no one asks inconvenient questions. Susan's Toe Held It, The Hog Factor, by Terry Pratchett. And his treatment of the Lost Boys is a classic example of psychological, emotional abuse. In the book, Peter kidnaps boys who have gone missing for at least 7 days and convinces them that they need to stay in Neverland because nobody is looking for them. He only takes the dumbest kids because the Lost Boys aren't allowed to be smarter than Peter, and he makes sure that this rule is enforced. For example, the twins aren't allowed to learn about their past because Peter doesn't know what twins are. The boys have been taught to rely on Peter for everything. That way they can't question him or disobey his orders. Edit: Peter doesn't actually care about the Lost Boys and views them as disposable, as evidenced by the fact that he kills the boys if they get too old. I think Clyde Shelton won the whole thing. He is driven mad in the wake of his family being murdered, then pushed even further when Cantrell and Rice make the plea deal. Jamie Foxx's character, Nick Rice, prides himself on his reputation for having a high conviction rate. No matter the cost, he was willing to take the plea bargains and drop or lower charges because he was so averse to risk. Even when it meant abusing the victims, his reputation and appearance mattered more than the crimes. He isn't willing to and isn't brave enough to pursue. The rest of the DA's office is this way. Rice is the only one who says it to Shelton's face twice, so Shelton shows him what action looks like. First he kills the original murderers, then he sends the video to the Rice household. Then he taunts the DA with the very words they used on him when they went ahead with the plea bargain, when they wouldn't let Clyde testify on his own behalf. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. He ends up bringing them to bow under the spear with the promise of a confession that they do not get. He just keeps killing in their faces. Clyde even berates Nick for not even trying to put his family's murderers on trial. That's why he was doing what he was doing. Every kill is because Nick keeps failing to learn his lesson. Shelton is railing against the system because corruption and ego superseded the administration of justice as a whole and they all were being brought to their knees. In the end, Nick does what he needs to do to truly stop Clyde. He stops bargaining and starts acting. That's why Clyde Shelton doesn't get upset or scared. He just smiles and sits and waits. Finally he can rely on Nick Rice to go after criminals, like him, for keeps. Winning just looks different in this movie. Hades really is a super misunderstood character. He's demonized for being the Lord of the Dead but didn't want it to begin with and is really only doing his job when he does evil things. Which on that, his evil deeds aren't even evil. He's just carrying out the natural order or punishing people who did actually fucked up things. On top of that he has one of the healthiest relationships with his spouse out of any of the married members of the Pantheon. It's seen as bad because of how it started, which was Persephone being kidnapped. He didn't do. Zeus did. And their relationship being responsible for season, which isn't his fault or really a bad things. Him and Persephone get along great and have a nice relationship. TBF Hercules movie doesn't really follow the real mythology in almost any way, shape or form, but they sure made it entertaining at least. Percy Jackson books on the other hand tried to follow a bit more, but also tended to paint Hades as a bad guy on more than one occasion. At least they also did a good job showcasing the unsavory traits of most other gods as well. Off topic, but her assistant's death scene in that movie was super off-putting and left a bad taste in my mouth for the longest time. At most she was just an annoyed nanny who had to look after two kids who couldn't pay attention for shit. Then she just gets one of the worst and drawn-out movie deaths I've ever seen, while the dude that coordinated all of the chaos, Vincent D'Onofrio, had a pretty tame death in comparison. Edit. Apparently the actress, Katie McGraw, actually requested to have her death memorable and brutal, and there wasn't a single stunt double throughout any of it. That makes it a bit more cool, but still gruesome. I remember catching an episode of Tom and Jerry in my teens, after years of it just being a childhood memory. In the episode, Jerry was trying to trick Tom into thinking that he was attempting suicide in his sleep. For instance, by smearing ketchup on his chest and on a kitchen knife which he then forced into his hands while he slept. At the time, I remember just being surprised by the fact that a knife and gun could be shown in a cartoon at all, but looking back on it now, even later, my god, that was fucked up. I'm pretty sure it was unprovoked, too. Tom chased him into his hole or something, and Jerry decided to retaliate by gaslighting him into killing himself. Sophie, Amanda Seyfried, in Mamma Mia. What kind of sociopathic prick invites 3 of her mother's ex-lovers to her mother's hotel on the eve of her wedding, without telling her, to try and force a situation where her real father will be revealed? Then she fucking bails on the whole wedding anyway to go traveling around the world. If I was a wedding guest having forked out thousands to get there for a non-wedding, I'd be livid. Edit. Did not expect this to blow up. My wife just tells me to stop trying to ruin it. She loves ABBA. Edit 2. Reading the comments. Yes, her mother is probably even more fucked up from A. Keeping Sophie's father's identity from her aunt. B. Keeping the father's from knowing they might have had a kid. Everyone is horrible. Edit 3. Reading more of the comments. Yes, a holiday to a Greek island is nice anyway, and yes, Sophie's mom did get married then and there, so I guess there was a wedding. I watched that movie with a girlfriend a while back, and the part that stuck out to me was she is treating her fiancé like absolute garbage throughout the whole movie. She invited people to their wedding without asking him or even giving him a heads up. Whenever he tried to spend time with her, she blows him off. And there were half dozen other things she says to him that seemed outright cruel. It's funny that you mentioned Mamma Mia. I really thought Meryl Streep's character was the asshole through the whole movie. She raises her daughter on an isolated island devoid of any opportunities, preventing her daughter from even knowing who her father is, far less having relationship with them, willfully robbing her of a crucial paternal figure, all in service of her own pride, insecurities and the need to do things herself, raising her in this island utopia. Not to mention that all of the boyfriends are genuinely good people, who each wants relationship with her and her daughter, and each of them are left unaware of their own potential daughter's existence until Seyfried herself reached out to them before her own wedding. Streep is really just robbing everyone in this situation, in favor of her own self-assurance. A guy I used to work with years ago had previously worked at the FBI in DC and heard all kinds of stories about J. Edgar Hoover. For one, supposedly when you went in his office there was a hug FBI seal on the carpet, but it was sunken down in the floor, so when you were standing in his office, his desk was up above you and you had to look up at him like he was some sort of deity or something. Also, one time 2 guys were called into his office to see him. Hoover mentioned one of the FBI agents who worked under them and said, "Give this guy what he deserves." It was unclear from Hoover's tone of voice whether he meant that they should reward the guy or punish the guy, and they were afraid to ask what he meant. They decided to give the guy a promotion, but stationed him way the fuck out in the middle of nowhere so their asses were covered either way. I know I talk to you like you're a little toddler and flat out refused to respect you as an adult, but you got annoyed when I tried to explain how to do your job better even though I don't understand your job at all. So now I'm going to play the victim and you have to spend all day catering to me or I'm going to throw a tantrum. My mom, never let your parents move in with you after you move out. Worst decision I ever made. Helped my mother move over a dozen times after I turned 18 and moved out. Last time she asked, I had been working doubles for God knows how long and I lived 2 hours away. I told her I didn't have the time to get over there that week. No one ever helps me. Okay mom, never mind the 12 or so times I helped you move in the past 4 years. Shit gets old fast. Stebbins was one of my drill sergeants. Word shed hearing about that years later. Obviously I didn't know him on any level other than getting yelled at. He did once tell us you're all evil and lazy. On the flip side, my battalion chaplain in the 82nd was Jeff Struecker, who was featured some in the movie. Good man. He had a display dedicated to him at the Army Ranger Museum in Fort Benning back in 1999 or so. Mrs. Doubtfire, he was a deadbeat dad and lost custody. He was given very fair terms to see his kids again, get a stable job and stop being a passive-aggressive deadbeat. Instead he decides to pretend to be an old lady to infiltrate his own house and use that knowledge to manipulate his family. Then when his wife dates a Pierce Brosnan, who seems like a good dude and genuinely liked her kids and was willing to be a father figure for them, what does he do? Vandalizes his car and knowing gives him cayenne pepper that he knows he is deathly allergic to. The poor guy could have died, but it's okay cause Mrs. Doubtfire is the hero. They villainize the only hero in that film. Jenny Lind was actually a great person and despised P.T. Barnum in real life. She earned $350,000 on the tours she took with him, $10,887,000 in today's money, and donated all of the proceeds to charities. She was also married at the time. Edit. After a little bit more research it looks like she wasn't married at the time of her American tours. She married in 1852. She also made terrible remarks about the woman whose face was disfigured by Travis the chimpanzee, which was very rude because you could see the lady had much more to worry about than her face, especially because that was the first time she had appeared on live TV and showed her face. Yet somehow Oprah did not support her for her immense courage. Weirdly she is also the reason that we knew about Josh Duggar's sexual assault of 5 of his sisters when they were toddlers. A woman from the fundy community had reached out to contact Oprah when she was good and to have the family on her show. They got all the way there to tape and she sent them home. The Broadway version of the movie has a song where Elsa ponders over the thought of committing suicide to save her Ethel from getting frozen after she kicks out Anna from the snow castle. She, just like Hans, thinks that if she is dead, the snow will be gone and summer will come back. But then she realizes that if her death wouldn't save the kingdom, there will be no one left to solve the problem and chooses not to die. Obviously Disney wouldn't dare to put this stuff in a kid's movie, and I do think Anna is more of a hero than Elsa is, but Elsa is also a hero. In the same vein as this, the McDonald's guy from that movie The Founder, it's crazy to me how many of my friends, admittedly a very bro-ish group, but I love them, watched that movie and thought he was a hero, a literal thief. Same thing with Belfort, was not a good guy. I think it's a big indictment on the American mindset that people so easily see them as heroes. It's fine to have a celebrity as a role model for the right reasons. I saw an interview with Samuel L. Jackson that put it perfectly. Okay, I'm a role model. If you want me to be a role model, ask me. I'm a college graduate. I'm a father, a husband, a son. I'm a good person with all of that. I'm a citizen. I pay my taxes. I've never been arrested. I believe in education. I believe in one's treating of man the way you want man to treat you. Yeah, I'm a movie star. To you, to me I'm just a guy with an interesting job. I don't want to cut in line in front of you. I don't want to lord it over you because you see me or I'm famous. I'm famous because you think I'm famous. Don't ask my characters. Don't ask Nick Fury to be your role model. Don't ask Mace Windu to be your role model. Don't ask Jules Winfield to be your role model. If you're talking about Samuel L. Jackson, I'm a professional. I show up at work on time. I know my lines, I hit my marks, and I treat the other actors and crew members with respect. That's a role model. It has nothing to do with who the characters are that I play on screen. Source: https://.b/2hglhwcj8 ? Goku is a weird one for me since he is seen as a hero for protecting and saving the universe countless of times, yet he always admits that it's never his intention to save the world. He only fights opponents to better himself and to enjoy himself, which has almost killed him and endangered the universe itself. He's a hero and he obviously isn't allowing people to die for his entertainment, but he shouldn't be labeled as one because he isn't one. In Cobra Kai he's a dick. In the original Karate Kid, Johnny was absolutely the bully. Daniel didn't help his situation when he sprayed Johnny in the locker room while he was rolling a joint, but Johnny and his pals instigated confrontations 3 times before that point. Also, to the dude who said Daniel was a pussy for running away instead of fighting, Daniel was getting chased down by Johnny and his friends, all of whom, except for one, proceeded to beat the shit out him. You can flip that logic around and say that Johnny should have manned up and fought Daniel one-on-one instead of getting his friends to dogpile on him. I love in the first episode of, I believe, Season 3 of Cobra Kai they called this out as a little homage, Easter egg to the theory that Daniel was the real bully of the Karate Kid. Spoilers below. When the parents are having an assembly about the massive school karate fight at the end of Season 2, Daniel stands up and then tries to begin this inspiring monologue complete with uplifting music in the background about how karate isn't the problem, and how he was a student at this same high school and how he was bullied and karate helped him ... When someone in the back just cuts him off record scratch style and says, "Bullshit, I heard you were the real bully." I laughed harder than I should have at that. How I Met Your Mother. More like why I should be allowed to bang your Aunt Robin. Schmosby is, at best, an unreliable narrator and all of him should be viewed as revisionist history. Lily, however, is an awful person. My case, she intentionally meddles in other people's personal lives because of her idealistic vision of the future, ditches Marshall to be Fowell, allow her DRM to be a painter, then begs Marshall to take her back when that doesn't pan out. He does because Marshall is the only decent person of that group, gives Marshall shit for trying to follow his dream, puts her and Marshall into massive credit card debt which forces Marshall to work a job he hates to pay it all off, and takes Ted's boss's property, the autographed baseball, to teach him and Ella's son like he's one of her kindergartners. Anyways, fuck Schmosby and fuck Lily, both are manipulative assholes. Don Draper. He wasn't necessarily portrayed as a hero in the show, but thinking of how people talk about him in real life makes it seem like they got the wrong idea. He's used as a prime example for stoicism and confidence. His manner is something that men strive to be back then and now. I just finished rewatching the show and can't help but get huge narcissistic vibes from him. He doesn't admit to faults, everything is tied to his pride, of his stolen identity. He constantly feels rejected and needs to feel special, despite the advertising world fawning after him. He can't stay in a committed relationship and reacts in a hypocritical manner if he is on the other end of an affair. I agree with this. They tried to paint a picture and I think they came up a bit short. Everyone makes decisions as a leader, and sometimes they're the wrong ones. As the leader, other people often paid the price for those mistakes. The difference between Rick and the leaders of other groups is that we get to see how heavily those mistakes weighed on him. We also get to see Rick's group struggle to keep their humanity as the rest of the world turns feral. Unfortunately, all this was a bunch of boring drama. IMO. Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. The Cincinnatus. Okay, so let me qualify this a bit, because by all accounts he actually was a heroic battlefield commander. Edit. Also note that we're dealing with second-hand info from the 450s BC. It's the other stuff that's wrapped up in his story that gets bad. Cincinnatus was made dictator of Rome twice, as far as I know, and he got famous for prosecuting a successful war and laying down his office immediately afterward. But that's the culmination of a career in which he was so virulently opposed to giving basic rights to people who weren't members of the aristocracy that he was forced to leave the city. His son was exiled during a series of effective gang wars against the dirty poors, and he drove to suicide the person who spoke out in court against his son. He thought that writing down the laws, so that, people know whether they're obeying the law, would reduce the power of the aristocracy too much, so he spent his whole life, and ostensibly the life of his son, fighting against it.